On a hot summer's day, there's nothing better than a babbling brook in the garden. In my postage stamp garden, I don't have a water feature, but I'm going to make one. And if I can do it, so can you. Hey, welcome back to my channel. It's Wendy here from Toonpish Crafts and I hope you're doing okay. I'm really excited about this video. I've made something that I've wanted to make for a very long time. You may remember a couple of months ago, I made some owls from outside resin. That's Let's Resin Outdoors resin. And they are now hanging up in my garden and I do love them. I wanted to make something else for outside and I only had a small amount of resin to do it with. So I've improvised, I've used other things in the resin to make this huge resin piece for the garden. I absolutely love it. I really hope you enjoy this video. Let's have a look. I think a garden needs a water feature in the heat. In a hot summer's day, trickling water is so refreshing. But unfortunately, that wasn't my garden. And this is about the size that will fit in my postage stamp yard. So let's make something. This is a 14-inch circle mould. And this is Let's Resin epoxy resin that is UV resistant and designed for outside. I'm going to use some blue Let's Resin colorant, and unfortunately I don't have a lot of resin. This 14-inch mould is going to take a massive amount of resin, and I only have 3/4 of each of these bottles left, so I don't have enough for the mould. I'm going to have to stretch this resin out to make what I want to make for the garden. I'm going to have to use my imagination to get this to work. So I've poured out about 3 ounces of part A, 3 ounces of part B, and I'm mixing it in the Let's Resin rechargeable mixer. Even though it's been through the mixer, you still should scrape the sides and the bottom of the containers because the mixing paddle doesn't reach there. I've added a couple of drops of the blue resin dye into the mix, and once I get my 14-inch tray, I'm dumping the whole amount of the resin into the bottom of the tray. This resin is only just going to cover the bottom of this mould, and that's 6 ounces or thereabouts. It literally is so thin, but it's going to have to work. This video is sponsored by Let's Resin, and I want to thank Let's Resin for giving me the opportunity to use this resin. It's not available in the UK yet, and they sent it to me to try. This is the only resin I have for outdoors, so I do really appreciate the opportunity to try it in the first place. So thanks, Let's Resin. I squirt it with isopropyl alcohol to get rid of any surface bubbles. I go around the outside edge with a microbush to get rid of any stuck bubbles. And now I'm going to start adding things to make the most of the resin that I have. To start with, I'm using some really nice coloured glass stones. These sort of things you can buy on Amazon. You can usually buy them for the bottom of fish tanks or for garden pots. And they come in all different shapes and sizes. This is just a multicoloured glass pack. And I'm putting it around the outside edge. Now this is the thing. What I need to do is I need to build up the side of this piece to have a larger side than the base. I'm trying to make some kind of water feature. And if you're making a water feature, you need sides to hold water. So once I've used that packet of glass stones, I'll now go on to some clear glass marbles. I'm going through my drawers at this point, looking for anything I can add in to increase the volume of the resin. So the more I add in, the more volume I get from the resin. It's difficult to explain, but it's going to increase the volume of resin that I have because of what I'm adding to it. Does that make sense? I hope I'm making sense here. I also decided, because this is going to be a water feature, to add some little water creatures. There's a couple of starfish. These are just cheap plastic animal type things to go into anything, I suppose, but they're very brightly coloured. Do you remember these small fish from the snail shells that I made? Well, I still had some left, and so I'm adding in those too. Anything to do with water is going to end up in this water feature. Now I know I'm going to be adding more and more to the sides to build up the sides, so I have a flat based bowl, if you like. So these pieces that I'm putting in the bottom could have done with going on a later layer, so they're higher up, but at the same time they're adding a lot of colour to the base, and even though they may get covered up with more resin and more stones, they're still going to be there and they still will hopefully shimmer through the water. At this point, I am really happy with how it's looking, but I know I don't have a lot of resin and it's really bugging me. You know, sometimes you can look back and say, I should have stopped there, but I didn't. This is a bag of shredded CDs, DVDs, shredded discs. And as I was looking for things to add volume to this, I thought I would dump a load in the centre and it might look a little bit like gravel. I shouldn't have done that. As soon as I started putting them into the resin, my heart sank. What have I done? Now I thought it would be great to put them in the bottom of this pond type thing, because the glass and shimmer bits on the plastic pieces would shine the light up through the resin. This was a point where I wanted to ring up and say,
can I just have that bit of time again, please? I don't ask very often, and I just want to change my mind with what I've just done. Can I just have 10 minutes back again? Are you sure I can't have that time back? Be very grateful.
But no. I knew it was the wrong thing to do, but I didn't have any resin. I couldn't stop and do it again because I didn't have the resin. So I had to make good. I had to get on with it. I had to deal with it. And I kept trying to convince myself, well, you know, you're not really going to see it. It's going to look kind of like grit at the bottom of a pond. It's going to be fine. But I absolutely hated it. However, I carried on because I had no choice. I didn't have another bottle of resin. I only had a small amount left, and that is going to have to be needed for alternative layers to build up the sides. At this point, I'm gutted that I did that, but you live and learn, don't you? And although I was gutted and I'm like, oh no, what have I done? What have I done? I still thought, yeah, I've got to carry on because I've got no alternative resin here. This is the outside resin that I have. This is all I've got, and I'm just going to have to get on with it. So the following day, after it had cured, I'd sat back in the evening, I'd pondered over it, and I thought, you know what, I'll add a bit more colour to the next layer and maybe you won't see so much of that specklediness at the bottom. So I've made up the biggest batch of resin that I had left. I have a fraction left in the bottles. This is the big pour. This is all pretty much of the resin that I could use. So I need to make this count. Now, as you can see, I divided the resin into 3 cups so I could put it into the bubble removing machine. I think there's only about 600 ml resin here. It's not a lot considering it's a 14-inch mould. I've got to make this count. I've got to get these sides built up and less resin in the middle. So I went on to Amazon a few days earlier and I bought 2 huge bags of glass chips. Not that expensive really. and I will put the Amazon link in the description box below. These are what's going to give me sides. So I started by putting them around the outside edge of the resin. Now really, it could have done with them being coated in resin first, but I'm going to mix up the resin and pull the glass back to the edges, and I gave up with my hands. I just thought, well, I'll just pour them in. I need all this glass in this resin to build up these sides. I can't just like faff around, just get on with it. You know, just get on with it and pour it all in. Let's face it, I'm not the most daintiest creature on the planet. I am a get in there girl and get on with it sort of person. And then with my hands, I just pull the resin over the glass so that they're all completely covered. You can see they change from being a white shade to being pretty much clear. They are clear, even though they look white in the bag. Now I also wanted to add in a little bit more colour. So I found these little blue glass beads in the drawer. I also found some other white and pearl type tiny beads, and I thought I'd scatter them around the outside edge. I'm still trying to add in some colour to create some interest, but really I just need to build up those edges. Now obviously resin is going to pull everything to the centre when it cures. Glass is quite heavy though, and the reason I'm using glass is because I know that plastic would float and not do what I wanted. I needed the weight of the glass to sit up against the side of the mould. But again, the resin will pull it into the middle. Resin is self-levelling, and gravity you can't argue with. These are the little white ones that I said about. They're kind of pearlish, pearly type colour. They look white on the screen. But again, they're glass. They're not beads. They're just little tiny spheres of glass. And I actually thought I'd sprinkle them in the centre to try and get rid of some of the colours in the centre. I have a few colours left of the pebbles that I put in the first layer to go around the outside edge, again to try and create a little bit more interest in the piece, give it some more depth of colour, because when it's going to be in the sunlight you want the sun to really pick up those colours. Now I did have a cunning plan. This is a large piece of plastic. That's all it is, plastic. And what I thought I'd do would be to lay it down into this pond water feature piece, and hopefully I could push it down with the aid of this silicone piece that I have laying around, and it would push the resin up round the edge. Now obviously I know that the weight of the silicone is not going to be enough, but I thought I could weigh it down with bottles and all sorts to try and push that resin up around the edge to try and give this lip that I need, and it will help the glass to stay where it is. So I put 2 bottles of resin on the silicone piece on top of the plastic, but it wasn't really heavy enough. I then put another 2 bottles, but it still wasn't heavy enough. These bottles are full, by the way, they're not empty bottles, they are quite full. So I pushed them around and managed to get another 2 bottles of isopropyl alcohol mix on the edges, and I left it to cure overnight. The following day I was so excited. I already taken the silicone piece and the bottles off of this before I'd press record, because I wanted to see what I've got. But this is me actually taking the plastic off, and although it doesn't look it, there is quite a nice edge now. Not huge, but it's a rough edge, and I figured it would be enough with the next layer of the last bit of resin I have and loads more glass pieces would hopefully be enough to create this pond type effect. So this is the last bit of resin I have. I've put again some more blue colouring in it, and I decided, because I don't have a lot of resin, I'm going to mix the glass into the resin in a container before I start adding them to the sides of this mould. After me doing this a couple of times with a mixing stick, I gave up on the mixing stick and just do everything with my hands because I was covered in resin anyway. So I figured, what's the point in trying to use a mixing stick I'm stacking these glass pieces round the outside edge of this mould on top of the lip that is already there. Now that it kind of has a raised edge anyway, hopefully the glass will sit there better. So that was my thinking. This is my only hope, really, to build up the edge. This is the last of my glass. I only bought 2 packets and this is the second packet. But hopefully I can get this to work. This is all experimental. I didn't know if I was going to end up with anything that would work here. But I kept going because I don't give up very easily, and you never know unless you try, do you? So by this point, I was absolutely covered in resin. There was resin everywhere, all over my table, all over the mixing cups, all over the handles of everything. I was trying really hard not to touch the camera, trying not to get it on the floor because I'd walk it around all over the place. But I was getting in quite a mess. I got to be honest, but it was so much fun. It was fun because I didn't know at this point whether it would work, whether I'd have a fountain at the end of it. But it seems as though the glass is sitting up against the edge of the mould. Now you can see here I'm going round trying to push this glass up into an angle so it covers up to the top of the mould. I knew that the resin obviously would try and pull it down as it runs through and down into the piece. That wasn't a problem as long as the glass stayed there and gave me that edge that I was looking for. I have got a little bit of resin left in the jug, so I am going to pour that into the centre, and hopefully that will stop the pull of the resin from the sides that just wants to slip into the middle. So I empty the rest of the resin into the centre of this piece. That will make it a little shallower for the water to sit in, but hopefully it will work. And still, it's all theory here. I don't know if it's going to work or not. At this point, I had no clue whether it was deep enough to hold the water that I needed for the water pump. I may have to fix things once I demold it, but we won't know that until I demold it and try it. I give it a good squirt with isopropyl alcohol, and then I decide to put a little bit more colour just around the top of the glass pieces. So I had another packet of the tiny blue glass balls. They are tiny too. I mixed that into the bowl with the rest of the resin that was left, and with my sticky resin hand I placed these beads on top of the glass pieces that were already there to give it a little bit more colour. I did think it looked a little bit too clear at the top. It kind of looks like bubbles, it kind of looks like frog spawn, but I think it adds interest, and colour is a good thing in my opinion. And I'm quite looking forward to seeing how this looks in the sunshine, because this is an outdoor piece. It's outdoor resin, and I think it would be perfect for a water feature. So the following day I can demold, and I am worried here if I have enough space to put any water in so I can have some kind of water feature. But I don't have any outside resin left, so I have to deal with what I've got here. I also didn't know if the glass beads that are on top are going to hold in any water that is put into the dish, because although they were held in with resin, there's probably quite a lot of holes around the outside edge. But we won't know that until I actually try to fill it up with water. But actually, the sparkliness of those chips in the bottom doesn't look that bad now. It's got 2 blue layers on top of it. I'm really liking this. I like the little starfish. They're the best bit. The fishes you can see. The turtle's missing and so is the crab, but I know they're in there. And if you look, you can see them. Now you may be thinking, I'm an electrician or an engineer. I'm neither of those. And I know that anything to do with solar and pumps is a bit beyond me. So this solar-powered fountain pump is ideal for me. I really don't have to do anything. It comes in a box. It's quite cheap. This one I bought because I thought the extra extending arms would stop it from floating around from the middle of the pond if the pond is too big. But I didn't know how it was going to work. I don't think with 14-inch mould you're going to need those extra bits. Just a simple one would have done. But it comes with lots of different fountain tops and it's pretty simple to use. Luckily the sun's shining, so let's give it a try. Well, I filled the pond up with water. I put the solar powered pump in the middle, and to my surprise I could get it to work. The water I couldn't fill up completely because there are holes in the resin up the top, but it's deep enough to hold water for the pump, and that's all it needed, as long as you don't put the tall fountain on, because all the water goes out the side, and the minute it goes out the side it's not going to get back into the bowl, so you have to keep topping it up. You need one of those fountains that will actually keep the water in the pond, if that makes sense. There are 4 different types of nozzle for this fountain. Only one of them actually worked for this size of pond. The others were far too aggressive with the water shoot out, and you do need a bright sunny day for this. A little bit of shade and it doesn't work. The brighter, the sunnier, the better. And you can see here that this water is massive. Really is no good for this size pond, if you can call it a pond, bowl. But this size works beautifully. The noise is adorable. Apart from the cars and the planes that go past my house, when it is quiet, the noise is gorgeous. And it's created quite a stir with people that have come in the garden and seen it. They love it. It's glittery, it's pretty. You can see a little orange starfish is brilliant. And the pink one the other side, they work beautifully. If you look, you can see little fish in there. And I absolutely love this. Not having a lot of resin, I still managed to make a huge piece for the garden, and I love it. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. Come back and see me next week, because you never know what I'm going to be up to. I never know what I'm going to be up to. Have a great week. Happy crafting, and bye for now.